From what you've learned about this case, why is it that fantasy, grotesque fantasy, actually was something they felt able to enact?
Sure. So I suppose when you look at children that have these dark, morbid curiosities, it's the old debate of nature versus nurture, right? So in terms of nature, people tend to have specific personality traits like anger management problems, impulse control, lack of empathy, lack of fear. And then there's the external factors. So that's nurture. So being exposed to violence, potentially being victims of violence themselves, not having like a healthy way to express their emotional outlet. And I think also in this particular case, it seems like there was a bit of peer pressure between girl X and boy Y. I think they were almost egging each other on and were playing chicken.
Sam, I'm so delighted to have you on, and I want to be educated in the next few minutes. I know Ralph Bulger very well. I interviewed him on Monday after the ruling that John Venables could quite rightly stay in prison. I'd spoken before to a man who told me that no child is evil. What I want you to do is try and understand where I'm coming from when I say this to you. You can talk about social pressures, you can talk about the dark web, you can talk about fantasy, and you can talk about egging on. It is not in any way, my friend, normal behaviour for anybody 10, 15, 25 or 35 to premeditate what these kids did, or these teenagers, writing letters about their fantasies. I understand your job is to try and find reasons. What would your response be to this question? Aren't some people just evil, my friend?
Well, I would never use the term evil because it's not a clinical term, but I suppose the equivalent is antisocial. So everything I was talking about before, lacking empathy, not caring about the rights of other people, being impulsive. So yes, I think some children do have those personality traits that are inherent. That doesn't mean that they're beyond redemption in some cases, doesn't mean that they can't be changed. But absolutely, I think some people are just born with those traits.
So if that is the case, what are kind of the warning signs? Because it is such extreme behaviour.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's quite hard to spot, especially nowadays when children have access to all this material on the internet. So it's quite feasible that you can have kids that are into these macabre interests and the parents don't even know. But I think if the parents do know, then it's important to act upon that. And you have to be very, very careful about what you do. I think that if a parent was worried about their child having violent tendencies, they should create a safe space initially to listen and show some sort of empathy and get them to express their feelings in a way that's not accusatory or not judgmental. Because if you don't do that, then I think they'll shut down. And then once you understand what the problem is, you have to find the solution, right? So it could be, if it's low level and it hasn't escalated to a dangerous degree like it did with girl X and boy Y, then it could be just coping mechanisms. So it could be about expressing their emotions, exercise, sport, etc., etc. But if it's gone through that threshold, past that threshold where you think there's actually a risk of danger, then you need professional help. You need therapy. There needs to be some sort of intervention.
Do you understand the feeling? I mean, this is an abhorrent, heinous crime. And actually, it was interesting. The judge made a point of saying this wasn't a hate crime. Brianna, I mean, it was just that letter, Sam, that I read saying, you know, we'll get her down there and you stab her. I mean, it's absolutely appalling. And I understand people's anger. I understand what people like you have to do. But there is yes, we can look at big tech companies, we can look at traits, but there is an increased feeling in this country that we need to be stronger with people who commit such heinous acts, to be fair. And I sort of get that. I get it as a parent, you know?
Yeah. I'm also a parent, and there's no question what they did was absolutely horrific. It was pre-planned, you know. But I suppose it's a balance, isn't it, between retribution and rehabilitation. If you only punish people and you don't try and look at the underlying causes, and you don't try and change them, then either you have to keep them locked up forever, or you have to accept that when you release them, they're just as dangerous, if not even more dangerous, than when they went in. Whereas if you try and tackle some of the underlying emotional issues, personality traits, then, you know, putting ethics aside, you just got more of a chance of them being less risky for society in the future.
Can you do that in this case?
It's hard to say without me having assessed these two individuals in person, but I would like to think that if they're this young, that they're still malleable. Yeah, they should be punished. They should go to prison. I'm not denying that for a second. But if they are going to be released eventually, then I think it's possible. I think if you dig deep down, as long as there's motivation from the individual to want to change and to want to have a fulfilling role in society in the future, then I think in most cases it is possible.
And I think that's why I got so angry the other day when we were talking about, to my friend Ralph Bulger about John Venables, because John Venables has been released twice and has then been re-arrested for child sex porn offences. So for me, you can talk about rehabilitation. I think we have to take, the rose-tinted spectacles off. What I love you saying this morning is, I'm a parent. Yes, I believe that I can, but certainly people should be punished. My thoughts always go with, Brianna's family and the hellish thing that happened to that kid.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'd say is that you touched on this yourself, Jeremy, but for rehabilitation to work, there has to be this insight, this drive from the individual. Yeah. You can't force somebody to stop being antisocial or evil.
I completely agree. Do you think, and just trying to work out how to say this morning, with the advent of social media and people seemingly know everything about everybody, are we seeing more of these heinous crimes, or are we just finding out about more of them nowadays?
I think that it's fair to say that hate crimes in general have increased. I know the judge said this wasn't a hate crime, but there certainly was elements of that. And I think that it's not just access to the internet, which obviously means that you can feed into networks of all these antisocial kind of criminogenic movements in the underground, but it also means that it's a lot easier to find targets, a lot easier to find other perpetrators that share the kind of beliefs that you do if you want to go and commit some sort of atrocity. So I think the internet is part of it, but there's so many other factors, isn't there? There's inequality, there's social injustice, there's
I'm not sure that though makes you go and premeditatedly stab someone. That's and I'm not trying to make an argument, because I really respect your opinion, but when people say to me, well, it's their upbringing, their parents very good, there are plenty. My problem with that is that totally disrespects people who have struggled all their life in this country and have never broken a law and might not have had a good start, but would no more think of stabbing somebody to death than flying up a wall backwards. That's me being honest with you. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I suppose my point was that all of these factors in combination can make people less happy, can cause social disharmony, which not in an individual level, but in a societal level, increases the risk of violent acts. But going back to what I was saying right at the beginning of this interview, I think it's not just the external factors that you've outlined, it's also the internal personality traits and being exposed to violence. So again, I can't speak for girl X or boy Y, but it's no surprise in my line of work, a lot of the perpetrators themselves were once victims of violence. So they're just kind of reenacting what they're used to.